Today's presentation is how to unlock more revenue, driving more direct bookings, and earning more revenue per guests. I'm here. My name is Conrad. We're going to go through Francois here in a second. I'm excited, for everyone that's here live with us, and I think we're going to learn a lot from it. So, Francois, for those that maybe haven't connected with you before, don't know much about you, a little background would be awesome to get us started here.
Yeah, 100%. So my name is Francois. I'm one of the co-founders of Enso Connect. We are a guest experience platform for hospitality, for vacation rentals and boutique hotels. And really what that means is our mission is to digitize and monetize the guest experience. How we do this, we focus on three core value propositions. One, increase the revenue per guest. So basically do more with what you already have. Two, save time on your operations, try to reduce the amount of friction your guests have. And then three, drive more bookings with the existing guests that you have. So again, we're trying to make sure that you can scale efficiently with your property management business. Some cool metrics, we've generated over $10 million for our customers in upsells. In fact, $1 million was generated last month. So we're things are moving up pretty quickly, I would say, growing at sort of 20-25% month over month. And the goal for this year is 30 to $50 million generated for our customers. We operate in over 60 countries. Over 10 million guests have gone through our platform, and that's about 50,000 units using Enso Connect to date. I see on that slide, yep, Forbes 30 under 30 for Toronto specifically, but also some other awards across UK, US, and Canada for myself and for Enso Connect, which is getting recognized as one of the best guest experience platforms out there. So that's a bit about me.
No, that's awesome. And it's good to hear kind of the size and scope because I think that, my feeling when we talk about the numbers that we've seen in our business, talking about guest demand and bookings and that sort of thing is not to brag and, or anything like that, but just to say like we've seen a lot of data. We've seen a lot of interactions. It seems like, the seat that you're sitting in, the growth that you guys are experiencing, you're learning a lot too when you can see that much
100%.
information and see that much data coming in. So yeah, for those of you maybe coming from the Enso Connect end and you register for the webinar, hello, my name is Conrad O'Connell. I'm the founder of BuildUp Bookings. In 2016, I founded the agency to work specifically with vacation rental managers, and we help them with search, social, email marketing, and we do some web work as well. Last year, or I guess now 2 years ago at this point, now that we're into 2025, I wrote a book called Mastering Vacation Rental Marketing, which is really everything I've learned over 10 plus years doing digital marketing for our clients, on building out, winning marketing campaigns, whether you've got one property, 10, 100, or 1,000. We work with companies all over the map there, over the last 10 years. And in the last 12 months, we've seen $50 million of direct bookings happen on our clients' websites that we've been able to track and measure. So we've been able to learn a lot, again, like I was saying a second ago. And hopefully we're going to take some of those insights and learnings today and kind of combine some of these things because I see Enso Connect, from our conversation so far, both with you, Francois, as well as your team, Sasha, some of the folks that we've chatted with already, as a great option for like the operational side of it. I do see a marketing component in there though when we talk about messaging. We talk about how people are reaching out as a past guest to book again. And one of the theses or theories that I want to talk about today a little bit more in depth is this idea of like, if you don't do the operations part well, the marketing doesn't matter almost in a way, right? Like if that property is not what they expected to, if they take an upsell and it's no good, like all these tech tools and things like that are great. But if you don't deliver on the guest experience, you don't have the right tools and software to help you deliver on the right experience, the marketing is just going to fall flat, right? So the way I look at it is like we have to work together. There's no second option. It's not like, oh, I can kind of do this part well and then I'll get some other benefit over here. You've got to have everything dialed in. The analogy that we do, I do a podcast, Francois, with a colleague of mine, Paul, and we talk about this idea on the podcast a lot of a chain. And maybe each link in that chain is a different part of your business. And you can deal with a chain, one little link in that chain being a little bit weaker than the others. Maybe not all of them are the same size, scope, strength, that sort of thing. What you can't deal with is a chain link so weak that it breaks, because if that chain link breaks, everything falls apart, and you're not going to have someone be able to grow your business. So yeah, we kind of got six sections that we're going to go through today. I've kind of got three on my side, and then Francois kind of three on his end, but we'll be conversational. I'll kind of jump in on a little bit on his, and certainly Francois, you're welcome to jump in on mine and kind of give you your thoughts on what you've seen, with your customers and with Enso Connect. So we're going to talk a little about messaging. We're going to talk about what I call the guest expectations stair step. So this idea of going up, going down, what we're going to learn about that. We're going to talk a little bit about the marketing side of it, cost per booking. How do we drive down our cost per booking over time so that as our company grows, we actually get more efficient with marketing? One thing that I'm quite passionate about and have some ideas on. And then I think in the second block here, Francois is going to talk a little bit more about the pre-trip side of things, engaging with the guests before they even stay. Of course, we've already mentioned the word upsell. I think we're going to spend a little bit more time on that here in a few minutes. And then anything on effective messaging, the booking process, the checkout process, all these things. But anything else you want to kind of flow in here or dive in here, Francois, before we start?
I'm sure I'm going to be adding things along the way, that's for sure. So this is going to be a fun conversation. Thank you, Conrad, for having me.
Yeah, no, absolutely. This is fun, so I'm looking forward to it. Well, let's dive in. So when we were coming up with this idea, like I said, I was working with the team, Francois' team, and we kind of, where do we start? What's the best way for us to kind of, go down the process here? And a little while ago on LinkedIn, I put out a graphic and I talked about this idea that there's kind of these like 7 stages of like general awareness of like I want to travel to somewhere to like I've actually stayed somewhere and that I'm post trip, right? There's kind of these 7 stages. And for the purposes of today's presentation, I've kind of narrowed it in because we can't really cover all seven in 45 minutes, right? But we can cover maybe at least five and six relatively well, hopefully, with some of the concepts we'll talk about today. And we'll touch a little bit on number seven, I would say, which is this idea of this post trip, loyalty and retention. So up on the screen right now, you're going to see some information or some guidance on this idea that when someone actually makes a booking, there's this moment between booking and stay that is quite valuable from a marketing perspective, certainly valuable from like a brand perception perspective. And a lot of hosts and property managers do nothing with this time. They make the booking and they go, oh, awesome. Francois and his family booked. They're coming down here to visit me in South Carolina in June. Can't wait for him to arrive. And I'm glad I got his deposit. And then we just ignore him until June 12th or whatever day he's checking in, right? That's obviously not ideal. I think we're going to talk a little about the software solutions that maybe that could be around that. But there's so many opportunities there to be like getting someone excited, getting them, thrilled about the opportunity they have to travel. There's so many things that can be done there, and I find most people don't focus on it. And I admit, in our marketing agency, Francois, we feel like, hey, we got you the booking, that was our job. We hand it over to the property manager and we say, now it's your job to make sure this guest has a good stay, right? And then we kind of check out. But what's kind of been your experience there when you think about how Enso Connects deals with this pre-trip engagement piece?
100%. I mean, there's the pre-trip. I'd go even so far as going the pre-booking piece, which is that some property managers will get a question, they'll answer the question, move on to the next inquiry. And it's the same kind of principle that applies to this pre-trip engagement. It's, I got an inquiry, I responded to it. My main KPI is average response time. I'm done. Which isn't always the case. It's actually getting the booking should be your main KPI. And then from there, once you actually get that reservation, is, as you mentioned, keeping them engaged, making sure that they're excited for their stay. And so being able to start that conversation, understand why they're staying in the property, what you can do to personalize their trip, all of that needs to happen before the anxiety kicks in of, oh, I'm checking in a few days and I have no idea what's going on. So to build that relation, I want to say, between the operator, the property manager, and the guest, that pre-trip engagement is the best place to do that, where you're not boggled down with questions of Wi-Fi and check-in and what's going on or maintenance or whatever it is. You're just building a relationship with your customer, who's the guest, which is effectively going to drive a lot more for later in the stage of this sort of transactional relationship that we'll talk about, beyond, repeat bookings and so on. If you're focused exclusively on the stay itself, I don't think you will get as much engagement for post-stay bookings or rebookings, if you will, if versus if you engaged with that customer ahead of time. It's also a great opportunity for upsells, but I think we'll dive into that a bit later, as
Yeah.
well.
Well, how much, and two, one thing I'm sure we'll talk about is like how much more receptive is someone to an upsell when you've got a little bit of engagement and a little just bit of positive interaction, right? Like I think one thing that people feel more emotionally, I guess, like opinionated about upsells and other things because they're like, oh, I don't want my guest to feel nickel and dime, which I think is that's a valid feeling.
Yeah.
Like I don't think I don't enjoy that feeling, someone who does travel, especially with my family and stuff like that. But at the same token, it's like if I had five good interactions and then I get an upsell, I feel differently about it. And it's like, oh, they helped me. They gave me a restaurant recommendation. They told me where to go. Like you said, check-in, Wi-Fi, all that kind of stuff. Then I get an upsell after. It's like, I can then choose at that moment how to do it, how not to do it. If I feel value, there's value in that. Or if I don't feel like there's value in that. But if it's like the first thing is like, hi, you're checking in. Here's your joke card. Buy this thing. Like, that's a little bit sharper of a message that maybe people don't respond to. So I'm with you on that
100%.
100%. Yeah.
100%. I'll add to that, which is the pre-trip engagement is also setting up your reservation team, who are going to handle the actual, check-in and so on, with to success. It sets them up for success because they'll get more information on what to expect from that traveler. What we've seen is leisure travel versus business travelers tend to have more questions. So if you're traveling on vacation with family and things like that, you tend to have a bit more questions, and probably because you're using up your limited amount of vacations and you want it to be special, versus a business travel, you really are there for a mission, and the accommodation is just, place to sleep effectively, not an experience and so on. But knowing that can help you kind of reroute resources, focus on certain clients more than others, figure out who's your VIP, your customer profile, who you're targeting, and also just, I would say, good insights. Like if you keep getting the same type of guests for the same type of of things like let's say there's a special event that's happening in the area, and suddenly now you realize like you have three guests that are booking that are coming for this special event. Maybe there's something that you can do to really curate that experience and make it memorable.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of pre-trip engagement and data that you can collect, obviously with the right tools, that allows you to personalize their stay at scale.
Yeah. I guess that's my thing too, right? Is like, but doing nothing is the worst thing. I think we both agree on that. Doing automation is the next best step. And I think the real key is doing automation that feels personal, or when
Correct.
time allows and when it is appropriate, personalize it as the best you can, right? And like I feel this way about a lot of things. Like, for example, right now I'm a customer, if you will, of a doctor's appointment. I have a doctor's appointment on Friday with a new doctor that I've not been to before. And they're messaging me ahead of time. Hey, just a reminder, your appointment's on Friday at this time. Here's the address, just in case you
Yep.
forgot it. Here's the phone number. And then I actually got one yesterday. It was interesting. It was a note from the doctor. I'm sure it was somewhat automated, but it's like, hey, Conrad, like excited to see you on Friday for this specific appointment. Here's a little bit about me. And I click there and there's a bio about the doctor. Like I never got that
Yeah.
before. Like that's, I
Yeah.
mean, do I really care that he's like a Clemson football fan? Some people in South Carolina would care quite a bit. I don't really care too much, but it's like, it's something, it makes me feel like, oh,
Yeah.
I know what he's going to look like when he walks in the door. Like there's just something there that I felt was kind of positive that most
Makes it so
doctors'
much
appointments,
easier.
yeah, just like you walk in and it's just like, all right, am I in the right place? Like, is this the right
Yeah.
time? Like, there's always, when you're going somewhere new, there's always like a little bit of anxiety, maybe that some people feel, myself included,
Yeah.
about that. So
And
it's been,
when we
it's been
talk
good.
about anxiety, I know people
Yeah,
might think we're building it up too much. Like how anxious could you be to check into a property? It's not the end of the world, but it's really those little moments of there could be a failure in the
right.
experience that you're, kind of bulletproofing to make sure that even if there is a bit of a failure or there's something that goes wrong, that there's a person on the other side that is ready to listen and ready to solve things for you.
Yeah.
So no,
Let's
couldn't agree more.
Let's put a pin in that. I'm going to come back to that
Yeah.
exact idea in a minute. So, last thing, as we kind of get into some more of the content here, we have some bonuses at the end. So we got two QR codes, one from myself, one from the team over at Enso Connect and Francois, and there's some really solid bonuses there that's going to get you, in my case, maybe a special offer on the book and some of those pieces. On Francois' end, a special offer for Enso Connect itself that I think is going to be really valuable. So stick around. We got some codes at the end. Stay with us there. So, in my belief, past guests are one of, if not the best marketing asset that you actually have, because your cost per booking on a past guest is going to be anywhere from like 5 to 10x to maybe even some cases 20 or 50x cheaper than getting a new guest. As you get higher up, I would say too, in the ADR scale, it can be, significantly more expensive to drive a new booking, right? If we look at the fact that if you're, for example, eating the commission fee that you might get on an OTA booking like through Airbnb, and you have a higher end property that's $1,000 a night, you might see a service fee on Airbnb that exceeds $4,000 or $5,000. I saw one the other day. We had a client that paid an $11,000 OTA service fee to get a reservation on his website. Now, this was a long stay. It was like almost a month long in a very high end property. So that's obviously not a typical, one that's coming in for most vacational managers on a daily basis. But think of how much work we can do. Not a lot is the subtext here, to get that person who booked for almost a month in a very high end home to come back. If that person has good experience, they're gonna likely come back. Maybe it's not next week or next month, but it could be a year from now, 2 years from now. And what are we going to pay to get that guest back if they book direct? Hopefully zero, or very minimal infrastructure costs, right? Compared to the $11,000 commission that Airbnb charged that person to make a nearly month-long booking there, on a high-end property. So I think one thing that we often underrate, and one thing that I've learned over the past 9 years and 10 years that working with all these different property managers, is some people think that the reason that these bigger companies have an advantage, bigger property manager companies in some areas have an advantage of their smaller ones, is that they have more money. I think they'd be surprised to think that a bigger company doesn't necessarily, they may be 10 times bigger than you. They actually probably don't spend 10 times more in marketing. They spend more in
Yeah.
marketing, don't get me wrong, but they probably don't spend 10x the marketing because they built up over time this kind of past guest database in their email marketing. So over time, their email gets more and more effective, but their cost to send an email doesn't change drastically. Maybe they pay MailChimp or one of their email service providers a few more bucks a month, but their list grows from when they started a few hundred people, maybe when they started doing email marketing. We have a client that we work with today that has 250,000 past guests on an email marketing list, large regional company, one of the biggest in that particular region, in a very popular market. But it's like, how much of an advantage is that, when they can send out an email and pretty much guarantee they're going to get anywhere from like 15 to 50 bookings, depending on how good the offer is, how good the seasonality is, and so on and so forth. Their cost to send that booking is like, sure, they have someone on their marketing team. We're helping them with some pieces there. So there's some cost there, but it's nothing compared to like running a lot of advertising or doing a lot of brand building. It's really minimal in that respect. So I think people don't understand this because we don't see it in that moment, or when we get a direct booking, we're just like, ah, it should work that way. But they don't realize that it's like a good accomplishment to get a direct booking. And when you start to get direct bookings from past guests, that's where you really actually see your marketing cost or cost per acquisition go down over time because you're not having to like keep shoveling money into the Google furnace. And I do a lot of it, so if you're a client listening or you're watching this later on, like we're spending your money on Google, we're getting traffic today. That's a good thing. But the goal is how can I spend hopefully a little bit less over time, or at least get a lot more efficient overall, so that the one, two, five, $10,000 I'm spending on advertising is more effective and helps more. So I have some other thoughts here, Francois, but any other, pieces that you'd want to tie into that side of
I
it
mean, I
more?
love that you call it the Google furnace because people think sometimes you just, start some ads and suddenly things will magically come to place. But I think part of this exercise of collecting these emails and marketing to your guests and so on is also building your marketing muscle. It's easy to just put an ad and spend more money and get more clicks and more views, but maybe not from the right people. Maybe you're not targeting the right audience. Like getting that contact information of your past guests and understanding who those past guests are will also allow you to be more specific on your marketing. I go back to that business traveler versus retail, leisure, etc. This is information that you probably already have. You just don't have it summarized in an efficient way that you can leverage in your marketing campaigns. But a first good step is indeed, yeah, to get that cost per booking down, and to do that is to retarget guests. Fully agree with it.
Yeah, love it. And so I think, as I think about the campaigns that we have that we've worked on, or one that we've seen, clients run, it's really timing and messaging is really what it comes down to, right? When do I send the message and what is the
Yeah,
actual content of that message? I think people sometimes overthink this or they overcomplicate it. If we get these two things right, we can have almost a little mistake here and there and kind of recover from it a little bit easier. If it's
yeah,
sent at the right time and the message is the right one, I think you shouldn't get too in your head, I guess, with respect to building out some of these flows or whatever. Maybe it's on the PMS side, of course, it could be on the Enso Connect side, whether you're building out some of these different ideas or concepts. I think, yeah, don't overthink it, right? Like try to send it at the best time. There's automations and tools that we can talk about here in a second about how to do that better. And what is that message that that person wants to receive? If we get those two things right, like I said, you could almost goof up 10 or 15 other things. And if you got these two things right and they had a good guest experience, it's pretty good deodorant, to make sure that you don't have further issues from there. And did you deliver on the experience? I think that's like the most important question to ask. Like whatever that person's expectations were, whether it was business travel or leisure travel, to Francois's point, they had a expectation. If you delivered on that expectation and they're happy with it, like that's a momentum, that's a positive step towards getting them back. Now, I would say with business travel, it's harder, much harder to get a repeat booking, I would say, generally speaking, especially if they were there. I think of like VRMA events that I've been to in the past, Francois, or like we went to Chandler, Arizona one year for a VRMA event. I had a really good time at that conference. Like that particular setting that we had that VRMA at was awesome. I personally wouldn't go back, not because I didn't have a good experience, but just because like I was there for this trip. We did this thing. It's very far away for me to go out to Arizona. That's pretty far for me. And it's not something I think my family would enjoy. So I wouldn't go back. But it didn't mean I didn't have good experience. I had a good experience. And if someone said, hey, would you recommend that I go to Arizona? I'd be like, absolutely. Here's a resort that we stayed at when we went to this VRMA event. It was beautiful. It was out in the desert. It was very calm and peaceful and serene. So we'll talk about word of mouth in a second, but like you can get word of mouth even if someone never books again with you. And that's still positive to your marketing success, to your marketing
for
outcomes,
sure.
if you delivered on the experience. So I think some people get, again, a little too binary. I've heard this before. Well, I have a low repeat booking rate, so therefore past guest marketing doesn't move the needle as much. I think that's true. It doesn't move the needle as much. I think of I worked with a client for many years, Francois, in Hawaii. Hawaii, particularly for East Coast travelers, has a very, very low repeat booking rate, well under 5% in the data set that this
Yeah,
client had. So if you come from the East Coast, you're up in Canada, you might go to Hawaii. A lot of people might only go to Hawaii one time if they're from the East Coast because it's very far for us to get out there. We got to fly all the way out to the West Coast of the US or Canada. Then we got to take another flight and get all the way out there. But the experience that those people had often led to word of mouth referrals. It led to good reviews. It led to, maybe it's a booking 3 years down the road, right? Maybe the every year rebooking rate is low, but maybe it's like, oh, remember when we did our 10th year anniversary in Hawaii? Let's go back for our 15-year anniversary, right? That sort of thing.
correct,
So I think that's if
correct.
you delivered, like you have that chance to win it again down the road. I'm sure you've seen the same on your side as well with your clients.
100%. And it's good feedback that you have here on Hawaii. For sure, location matters.
Yeah.
But I would say, the repeat bookings also depends on the guest profiles that you have. Like you gave the example of Verma, but there are certain conferences like the Short Stay Summit that I was just at in London. It's been in the same location for the past couple of years. And the first time I went, I stayed in a place that was really far out from the conference center, and instantly I was like, "Hey, this is not convenient for me for the conference." Second time around, booked a place near the conference center. Third time around, booked the same place. Fourth time around, booked the same place because I just knew it was efficient. I get there, I know how to get there. It feels, second nature. And I feel like, I took the liberty of booking that place again and so on. But have that operator known, hey, I'm here for this event. This is when the dates are. Maybe they can look into it for next year and promote that booking. Because I ended up booking again on one of the OTAs just to make things more efficient. So there's definitely an opportunity for repeat guests, but as you said, the first step is just being able to email those guests and seeing what that is. The second step, I would say, is going even more granular on that data and figuring out who's who and why are they here, and is there an opportunity to book them again. If it's a bachelorette party, chances are next year they don't have another bachelorette party. I mean,
Let's hope
I
not.
hope yeah, exactly. I hope the wedding goes well, but maybe it's someone else's bachelorette, right? And so
Right.
just understanding your guests' travel behaviors ahead of time. And we go back to what we were saying, at the beginning, which is that sort of pre-stay, which is empty today, is a great opportunity to start figuring out how you're going to market to these guests again.
Yeah, I think I have something on it later on, but I'll insert it now. And if I repeat myself, then I apologize. But one thing I think that's underrated in some of our software tools too, at the PMS layer at times, is the idea that, Francois, let's say we're friends and, you have a few friends, we all go on a golf trip together, right? And it's like, maybe I'm the one that made the reservation. It was my turn to make the reservation. But then you and a few other guys, come with us, or me and my family are there, that sort of thing. Well, it's very possible that you or someone in our group would come rebook that property again, but technically
Yeah,
it's a different email, right? So like in a system, it's going to say, oh no, this is a new person. This is John. Conrad was the guy that booked before. They're not related. But that's what happens a lot, particularly with larger group travel, is like you said, the bachelorette party for Susan, it was her year this year, and then next year her friend Marissa gets married, and then Marissa makes the booking. But it's like that's kind of the same thing, right? Still past guest
yeah.
marketing. Just our systems are a little, I don't want to say dumb because they're computer systems. They don't understand the fact that that's how it worked. But if we don't gather the email address of other people, that's kind of how we have to think about it, right? So kind of
For
a nice
sure.
phrase
I mean,
there.
I'll
Yeah.
just add to that, it's something we're actively working on. And I think part of the reason is most property management systems are built around the concept of properties and listings. Most guest experience platforms are currently built around the concept of a guest, a booker. And I think that's going to change over time to look at guests on the guest experience platform side of things, to look at guests more holistically. Like you said, there's four people staying in an accommodation. There's the primary booker, but then there's all these associations to that primary booker that are also marketable contacts and upselling contacts as well. But
Mhm.
we'll get to
Yeah.
that in a bit.
Yeah, yeah, I was gonna say just because I didn't want the upsell doesn't mean that you wouldn't, maybe you'd pay for
Correct.
that experience. So I'm with you
Exactly.
there. Yeah, so we kind of touched on this, but to be clear, rebooking comes in many forms. It's not always just, we're just talking about it, just that one person that, left and then they come back 1 year later. Like that's nice. Like the example that story that Francois told of like, I've been in this place before, I booked it again for the next event next year. That's cool, but like that's not gonna be a bulk of it. They're going to tell a friend. That's also a form of rebooking, or at least a form of referral, as a way for us to think about how our brand experience is going to end up lowering our marketing costs over time. They're going to leave a review, which other people are going to see. So if Francois leaves a review of that place he stayed in London, and then 10 other people see it, and he writes a pretty detailed review about why it was so great, that's going to help influence 10 other people to make that reservation, even if though he doesn't know them, maybe, or has never chatted with them before. He might share a post on social. Ah, man, when you're coming to London, stay at this place. It's solid. Like you'll have a good time. There's a lot of plus there. And then, yeah, we just hit on this one, but part of the group rebooks. I think this happens quite a bit, with this larger group travel, and we really have no way of tracking it. And that's why some clients say, oh, I have a 10 or 15% rebooking rate. And I bet that's not actually the case. We just have a really difficult time tech wise and like software
Attributing.
wise actually figuring, yeah, attributing
Yeah.
where the value is there. So this is kind of an idea that I've had for a while, and there's been some data that's kind of backed this up. I need to redo this study, but there was a study a while ago. I think it was a Focusrite one where they asked people like 30 or 60 days post checkout if they remembered the name of the property management company they booked with. And I don't know the number offhand, but it was ridiculously low. It's like 10%, less than 10% of people remember who they actually booked with 30 days prior. So they were just there 30 days ago. They might have spent $2 to $5 to $10,000 booking a high-end vacation rental, and then a month later they go, I don't know, I think I booked an Airbnb. Right? You have to remind them. People get assaulted with marketing messages. You're here listening to a marketing message right now, not to get too meta. Right? So people get marketing messages all day, every day. You have to remind them about what your brand is, what you do, what your value proposition is, and if you don't go the right path down there, then your people will forget you, and then your rebooking, your remarketing, your retargeting won't work as well if you wait too long. Like one thing that's a bit of a red flag for us on the email marketing side when we're doing that is when a client comes to us and go, hey, I've got this list, there's 5,000 past guests, but I haven't really been sending to them much. And I'm like, define that for me. What do you mean that you haven't sent to them much? Oh, I haven't sent to this list in 2 years. And I'm like, they're not going to remember. Like it's probably going to kill our open rates or our, click rates on that first email we said. We could put together a beautiful email. They're going to get it and they go, wait, what's this company? And they're going to either
Yeah.
click unsubscribe at a high rate or they're going to click spam at a high rate. And that is just like, it's almost like the list
Killer.
becomes less valuable over time. Yeah, it's like it kills the performance of it. So that's a
The
tough one.
list and the domain too, because if you start getting marked as
Yeah.
spam for a lot of those guests, then that's going to be an issue for the next email you send, even to the guests that are, the right ones and are fine with your marketing. They're just not going to see it at all.
Yeah,
because
yeah,
it's going
and
to end
you're
up in their spam.
it's not like you can have build another domain, right? Like that domain is almost an asset in your company. So yeah,
That's right.
whatever you do, right? Don't ignore the list. I would almost rather someone send out a very bad mediocre email, but at least the guests aren't forgetting about them than like send out nothing and then it's like it just kind of fades from memory and they don't even
For
recall.
sure.
So
For
we touched
sure.
on this one earlier. This is a new concept in workshopping. So bear with me, Francois. I haven't sold this to many people. So if I'm way off and the people listening live don't like it, then I'm open to hearing different feedback on this. But here's kind of the way that I've thought about this lately. When I go and check in the property, every positive interaction I have that meets my expectations, it's like going up a stair step. So if I walk in and it's clean and the lights are on and everything is kind of as pictured in the listing, whether it's a direct booking or an OTA listing, I'm like, cool, I'm up one stair. I get on the Wi-Fi, it's fast, the password's accessible to me, sick, I'm up one more stair. And I keep kind of going up these stairs the more and more positive I see. Oh, the view is beautiful, everything's awesome. But the moment something bad happens, the moment I turn on the shower and there's brown water coming out, the moment that there's a bunch of construction noise that I wasn't told about. I don't actually go down one step. I don't. Oh, I was happy about nine things, and I go down. It's like I fall down the stairs. It's like my expectations went from good, 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 good to bad, and the bad doesn't go back down one step. It craters down. And I think when I look at some of our clients' reviews and kind of what I see happen over and over again, it's one bad thing creates almost like the spiral effect of like I found one bad thing happen, and then all of a sudden I noticed the hair in the shower. Before I didn't notice the one hair
Yeah.
sitting in the shower, and it kind of creates this like negative loop that I think can harm reputation. So that's my new idea. What do you think? Kind of think of that as a visual and kind of this concept here.
I mean, I think it's a perfect visual because it goes back to trust and building trust effectively. I mean, we always say it takes time to build that trust, and I think this is kind of the same concept, right? You're incrementally building trust that you are the right stay for this guest, and one bad thing can break that trust in a way, and then you have to rebuild it slowly again, and that can happen multiple times throughout a stay. You can have an issue, and then you have to rebuild it up, and then another issue and rebuild it up. So it's not it's a wave in a way sometimes for certain guests. But I couldn't agree more with the how you framed this story. I think the next question is like, how do you prevent these? And where are these areas that you are falling down that you can easily prevent or make more aware? Because I think the other thing is it's all about communication. I think part of it is the surprise, the shock, the of falling down those stairs versus knowing that there's a few stairs to go down and then back up. So being able to communicate that, well, maybe communicating that there's brown water coming out in the first few minutes of the shower isn't the best way to sell your property in the first place, but maybe that's just getting a plumber and fixing that in the first place. But there's other types of issues that I've seen with guests and property managers that are, easy, quick fixes, or just can be communicated ahead of time so that it's not a surprise. And it doesn't feel, something like there's a garage in the listing image and someone expects that they can cover their car and park it. And you tell them last minute, no, actually, this is for my own car. And then they get kind of frustrated because they have to park their car somewhere else. So now parking is an issue because you've had this 4, 5, 6, 7 times. But maybe it's about offering, hey, we wanted to let you know, like, yes, we have a garage, but we can't do it. So we're offering free parking here and providing that information pre-trip. Again, you've let them know ahead of time. There's no surprise. So there's no falling down those stairs. But I love the metaphor. I think it makes perfect sense. And I mean, it's exactly what we see time and time again with guests.
This is off script. I'm curious though, and I haven't seen this functionality in the software, so maybe this is a bit of an educational thing for me as well. Do you guys do some of the PMS platforms I see now where they're reviewing all the text from a property and they're giving you like a summary, or they're like using one of these LLM tools or AI tools to be like, hey, you've gotten 5 complaints in a row on this property about parking. Like, are you guys doing anything in that realm, or what's kind of your experience there?
Yeah, so we're not summarizing yet in terms from a task perspective to tell you where to improve. That's certainly something I'd love to start building out. But what we are doing is tracking the sentiment of each conversation so you can know if something is starting to go wrong. And what's interesting is when we first built that out, we did a very basic probabilistic model where, if you had uh, 3 messages that were positive and 2 messages that were negative, you would average out slightly higher than negative. And slowly we switched to more of the LLMs that we see out there, so ChatGPT and so on, versus this very, I want to say, conditional type algorithm or conditional logic type algorithm. And it's interesting to see how mid stay, a guest that is unsatisfied, it takes a lot more to build them back up to a satisfied guest than just fixing the issue that they had. That guest will remain an unsatisfied guest according to these LLMs and even according to the reviews we're going to see for guests. Um, if you don't go above and beyond once they've faced that issue. It's kind of frustrating because sometimes you feel like it's a small thing, you fixed it, it's done, move on, guest, but they haven't moved on. They're still down there. So you got to help them back up.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. I'm doing a presentation this upcoming Monday with Robin from Premier Properties at the VRMA event in Savannah, and she talked about a mattress. She has a story that we're doing in the presentation about a mattress. Guests hated mattress and booked a month, and they said this like on the first night. So she's like, "Oh man." Long story short, she fixes the issue very quickly, gets a new mattress in there, gets everything replaced within like less than 24 hours. There's a new mattress exactly to their preferences and liking, and they went from very upset to very happy very quickly. But it took like I would say pretty solid effort, almost like a Herculean effort, right? To go in there and fix this problem very quickly, get this new mattress in there. They felt heard. They felt like they were listened to, and then they fixed the problem and it led to a positive thing. But, it's also like, obviously you can't replace a mattress for every guest, right? Like that's always a challenging situation. Like how far can you bend before you break, with some of these
For
guest things. And
sure.
some guests have the wrong expectations. So I realize it's hard to at the property management end, but
But you got to understand that, right? Once they have the wrong expectations, don't blame it on the guest. Maybe blame it on your process. Maybe on, how you're describing your property. Yes, you're getting these bookings, but you're disappointing people at the end. So be more clear about what you are actually offering. Don't oversell in a way.
yeah, couldn't agree more. Yeah, so the fall is fast, and what happens when you miss, in my experience, right? So the review is about the fall. We just kind of touched on that concept, not the 10 steps beforehand. So that's the bummer, right? You do 15 things well, and that one thing that didn't go well, unfortunately, is where the problem comes from. So we kind of hit on this concept already, but I'm just going to kind of finish my slides out here. I know this has been pretty conversational, but Francois has some really interesting things to show that I want to go through. But a new guest, think of this in your head. A new guest is probably the most you're going to pay to acquire a customer. Whether they come from an OTA or direct is almost immaterial. It doesn't matter for the point that I'm going to make here. When someone is coming in for the first time, you're going to pay the most, hopefully, that you're ever going to pay for that guest in that transaction. I think people say a lot people say this a lot, and I don't find that people often act in this way, but they say, "Oh, I'm going to get a booking from an OTA, and then I'm going to make sure that they book direct next time." And then I go, "Cool. How are you going to do that?" And then they actually don't really have much of a plan to actually do that. They just say, "Well, I'm going to tell them. I'm going to remind them, like, hey, if you book on my website, you get a lower rate." And my sort of thesis on that is like, it can't bother the guests that much that they pay a service fee on Airbnb, because otherwise Airbnb would not have grown to the market share and the dominance that they have today. So the service fee is obviously not that big of a factor. It's not that big of a consideration of why someone would not book with you. Again, or those two things can't follow. It can't be that the guest hates service fees and the guest loves Airbnb, because those things are naturally linked to one another. So if you're paying a very high commission or you're paying a very high cost per acquisition, whether it's on Google Ads, Facebook ads, your own marketing efforts, the least you can do is just try to make sure that you get a returning guest by putting in things in place through this whole process, like we've talked about: pre-stay, during stay, post-stay. Some of these are more marketing things, some are more operational, but it kind of follows through. It's the idea of the chain, like we talked about earlier. Each of those things have to connect together, and then you're going to find a very low CPA when you're getting returning guests in there. So, Francois, I know we've kind of been
100%.
conversational so far, but these are your slides. So I'm driving, so just tell me when you want me to go to the next slide, and we'll
Yeah,
we'll
for
keep it rolling.
sure.
Yeah,
For sure. So, and thanks for rolling with the slides. That's my favorite when I don't have to handle that part. So appreciate it, Conrad.
happy to do it.
So we're going to be talking about here the guest experience being a sales funnel. And this really ties with what Conrad was sharing about sort of the expectations and so on. And I'm going to make a comparison to the traditional sales funnel. So if you wouldn't mind moving to the next slide. The guest experience is really a sales funnel. If you go to any traditional company, and by that I mean more so traditional software companies, I'm sure it's slightly different for retail and so on, but it's a traditional sales funnel is you've got a marketing qualified lead, which is called an MQL. So someone has shown intent or interest. You don't know if they're qualified. That's up to you how you want to define QL, qualified lead. Then you go through that qualification process. So is it the right person? Are they interested? Do I want them, etc.? And I'll give you a context of Enso Connect, and then I'll make the parallel for the property managers. We get people on our website daily. They come in, they explore our pricing, our features, etc. They might even contact us or submit a request for a demo. And why do we have that demo form? Because we can only operate for certain property management systems for now. Which means, if you're using Guesty, great. If you're using Vontio, great. Lodgify, amazing. Like all of these PMSs, we can help you out. But if you're using Beds24, can't help you out right now. So we're going to qualify you, and that can be automated, that can be manual, that could be a call, etc. Once that's good, we're going to do a demo. We're going to jump on a call. We're going to show you what we have, understand your pain points, figure out if this is the right fit for you effectively, then give you a proposal, and either we win the deal, we lose the deal, or maybe we circle back later. And the reason I make this parallel is not just so much to tell you what you going on my website right now and booking a demo is going to look like. but more so to make the comparison of my business from a sales perspective is actually very similar to your business as a property manager. So on the next slide, what I have is a comparison of this same traditional funnel with what your funnel looks like. So your marketing qualified lead is the guest searching. First of all, are you even searchable? Meaning, can they even find your property? Can they find your website? Can they find, are they going on Airbnb? Are they going on Google? Where is that initial guest search? The qualification is them inquiring about the property. Now, in a way, it's them qualifying you more so than you qualifying them, because I'm sure you'll accept many guests. But at the same time, you might have your own qualifications. You don't accept, anyone who's a minor, or you only accept for 3 nights minimum instead of 2 nights. And someone's coming in and saying, well, I want to book your place for 2 nights, not three. These are part of the qualifications that set your business. The demo booked is the booking is confirmed. And some might say that the demo booked is, them, it might be an earlier stage in the guest experience. The reason I put this here, because some people think the booking confirmation is really like, I've won, life is good, we're good to go. But it's really just, we're still testing the waters. They can cancel the reservation. Things can happen where they don't end up staying in your property. They decide to switch it up. So I like to say that the proposal negotiation phase is really the experience, and the closed one is the repeat guest. The fact that you were able to transform that first experience into a repeatable experience is what I would categorize as being a closed one. And just having a booking is a nurture. Not having the booking and them canceling is a closed loss. And each of these are opportunities to kind of rephrase how you're going to market them, right? Who is your closed one? Who are the people that are repeatable, that came for a specific reason, or reasons that you think you could remarket for the following year, following month, following quarter? Who are the people that you are going to have to nurture because they came here for this one-time thing? Chances are they're not going to come back. Not for a while. The Hawaii trip that Conrad shared is a really good example with distance and so on. It might not make sense. But maybe it was really an experience, and it becomes their de facto vacation place because they just absolutely love it. So there's kind of a push-pull dynamic here, and you can change it up based on locations and what you have to offer. So, on the next slide, what I like to share is to explain that, who actually owns these different pieces of the experience, because we talk about it as a sales funnel from inquiry to booking and so on. And when you break down the technology stack that you're using right now, the OTA owns the top of your funnel and the bottom of your funnel. So you're dealing with the booking a demo and providing an experience. That's it. You are I want to say the slave to the machine, in a way where it's your property, it's your asset, you're managing it, but you're the one actually having to give the experience, provide the check, and do all this work, only for then the OTAs to keep repeating it. Now, look, I am big on direct bookings and so on. We have to recognize that without these OTAs, it would be a lot more difficult to get that much more volume. The industry would not be as big as it is today and as professionalized as it is today without OTAs. So, we are, and I'm not saying this because we're partnered with some of these OTAs. I like to stay as impartial with where the industry should be headed and so on. It is a balance, but really the thought is like, can you build out that initial marketing qualified lead piece yourself? Can you do that qualification? Can you source out these guests, and can you drive more of those repeat guests?
Well, it's
Um,
it's so funny on that note, real quick, Francois. I had someone ask me
yeah,
that the other
please.
day. He's like, "Well, what is the actual optimal percentage of getting OTA bookings versus direct bookings?" And I kind of answered him, I think it's around 50 or 60%, plus or minus 10%, maybe, depending on the market. Because I think
Yeah,
if you're actually, and we have some clients like this, by the way, that are 90% direct bookings, they're almost anti-OTA to the point of actual detriment, in my opinion, right? Like they're actually hurting themselves a little bit. They're hurting their business a little bit by being almost more anti-OTA. And like
agree.
generally speaking, I'm the one who's like promoting like more direct bookings, doing your marketing, that kind of stuff, right? But I do think that like a dial, you can turn that dial a little bit too far one direction. And I think it's
Yeah,
because many of these companies who are that way have been doing it that way for a long time. So it's usually not a new company that's very highly direct marketing or direct booking focused. It's usually one that's been around, like one of our clients has been around since 1986. He'll joke with me, Conrad, my company's older than you, and he's
yeah,
right, of course, about that. We joke about it, but the truth is he's been doing it that way for a long time. It's actually hard for him to see it from the Airbnb perspective. Whereas the new
yeah,
host is like, they've only seen it from the Airbnb perspective. So they like, oh, of course the OTA is the way I get there. So yeah, I kind of
exactly.
agree with you for the most part that you can take it the OTAs without being on the OTAs. without at least billboarding on them, you might actually lose a lot of bookings that you would get otherwise. There's some people that only go on Airbnb when they're making a reservation. They don't even look on Google. They don't look on these other
Yeah.
platforms. So can we get people there? Absolutely. We do it every day. But is that going to capture you the widest net of people? No, not in my experience from a marketing end. So
I could not agree more. And I think, part of the reason why, these OTAs, I like to say, control the business and so on. And this is actually part of the next slide is because are you delivering a streamlined experience or not? And this is where, that customer that you're sharing from 1986 is probably offering a very consistent experience for their guests. It's probably targeting an audience that's been coming back for a while, and it's become kind of almost like a family destination for the past 20 years, a generational destination, if anything. My parents used to bring their kids here for vacation, and I'm going to bring my kids here for vacation as well. It could be that. I mean, that could be wrong. It could be
no,
something
you nailed
completely
it. No, that's
different.
exactly what it is.
That is what it is. Yeah. I mean, and I've seen these over and over, so I totally understand that part. But is there a new market that you can also open up to and drive even more bookings? So one of the reasons I think the OTAs kind of control that piece of the experience is because they provide a consistent experience from the booking, the check-in, the everything. And Airbnb, people, when I talk to people who are not in the industry, they always tell me, oh, you work with Airbnbs, don't you? And I try to tell them, oh, vacation rentals and things like that. And try to, differentiate it from just it being Airbnb. But there's a reason why they've coined that term, like Googling something or, Facebook. I don't know if Facebook has the same term pizzazz as nowadays, but even Instagram, right?
Yeah.
Um,
TikTok. My
TikTok
my dad will describe any short form vertical video as a TikTok, even though it's
as
I'm
a
like,
TikTok.
but that
Yeah.
was a reel. He's like, yeah, it's
That
a
was a
TikTok.
real, yeah, exactly, exactly. So, and I think it's because the booking experience is super smooth. So when I go on a website and the clunky experience of trying to figure out where the property is, and it feels like you're adding a property to a shopping cart because you built it on some Shopify store that was made for retail and candle business, but you changed the candles to a property instead. Like that's not a great booking experience compared to Airbnb, right? How do you gamify that? How do you make it smoother? So there's a whole part of it that's on the booking side. But if we go back to the previous slide where we talked about what you currently own versus what you had, let's forget about where you could compete with the OTAs on the OTA driven marketing qualified lead and close one. Let's just talk about the main part. You're the one offering the experience, and yet people are still referring to you as an Airbnb. Airbnb didn't offer that experience. You did. So why aren't they recognized? And to what Conrad had shared before about 30 days later, you ask someone where they booked and they have no idea and they'll tell you Airbnb. Why is it that Airbnb is the word that people are associating? And it could be Airbnb, it could be verbal. I'm just using Airbnb as the example here. They are the experience, even though you were the one to provide it. And that's because the experience you provided wasn't memorable enough. It wasn't not only memorable enough, it wasn't branded necessarily. It wasn't smooth. It felt kind of choppy. All of these things that, are many steps down to, kind of echo on Conrad's analogy there of steps up and steps back down. I feel like are steps down on your brand and your brand equity. So if you want to move two slides over, one of the things that I say is the reason why it's hard to compete with these OTAs is simple. It's inventory size, it's brand equity, and it's marketing power. For context, Airbnb decided not to partner with Google Vacation Rentals. And the reason was they didn't want to spend their money on being not a brand. They want you to remember Airbnb. They want to spend their marketing dollars on you knowing Airbnb as the brand. So their brand equity is so much bigger than you. And when I see property managers try to compete with that, you're throwing money in the furnace again. It's not worth it. These guys have billions of dollars. Like this is what they do, bread and butter. They're focused on one thing, which is to get you bookings and you being any of you. So I wouldn't fight on that. I would go more local. I would go more unique, more specific, leverage those reviews to figure out why is it that someone might remember your brand versus someone who might not. So really the
My,
thought is oh, go ahead. Yeah,
No, I was
please.
gonna say the one thing I always say when it comes to that sentiment of like marketing dollars is the goal is not to outspend the OTA platforms, right? What I always frame it to my clients as, and I think you were saying the same thing. The goal is how can I make my advertising and my marketing profitable? That's my goal. So like whether your budget is $500, 5,000, or $50,000 a month, like let's get that profitable, and then we can always add onto it and build more off of it from there. One thing I actually don't like people seeing is starting new for the first time and then going and spending $20,000 right away without really knowing exactly what they need to be doing, because that is a handy way to burn a lot of money and not get the right outcome there for sure.
A
And
100%.
you made a funny comment there that I wanted to hit on too. With we there's this there's a national company right now, Vacasa, that's going to get split out most likely into these individual markets again with Sago. That's all pending. Who knows? As we're recording this, that's all kind of in the air. But it's so funny. I'm like, until we try to let Vacasa run the whole country, can we have one property management company run like a state? Like, or even like a region? Like, could we have one property manager do a good job in like North Carolina and South Carolina, or like Florida, or like just, two areas? Like, we haven't got there yet. And then we try to do this whole thing where we're, everywhere all at once. And that obviously has had its, downfall. And now it's going
Yeah,
to a different direction. So,
even that I think is really hard. I mean,
yeah.
and I know we're short on time, so I want to skim through a few of these other slides, but the I think if you ask a private equity group, they'll tell you, yeah, it's completely possible. But I think if you ask any of the guests that stayed in those properties, they'll tell you, I wish it wasn't possible. So I would focus on local more than anything, because you know that you have that domain expertise before you go out and scale too much. So
Mhm.
again, my goal is to shift you from this guest experience that you see here to the following one, which is you control that inquiry, booking, confirmation experience and that repeat. So use the OTAs as a marketing channel effectively. It's got a cost, just like Conrad said, for acquiring that customer. And yes, it might be higher on one than the other, but then leverage all of the rest of that pipeline for the next steps. I recognize we're short on time, Conrad, so I'm going to take over
No.
the slides if that's cool, just so
Yeah,
I
yeah,
can
for sure.
click through them if that's okay.
Yeah, I think, well,
Replace.
I'll stop the share. I'll let you share if you want to do it that way.
Yeah, there we go.
Yep.
Let
That should do the
me
trick.
tell me if you can see this. Am I on the right page?
Yeah, I see seamless guest experience, effective communication.
Perfect.
Yep, yep.
So, how do we make this happen? Seamless guest experience and effective communication. So, it goes back to what we had talked about those steps up, steps down. How are we proactive with it? And thinking through that experience from inquiry to post stay, not just the check-in experience, not just the how are they going to get through the door, but everything before that. Is there information you need to collect? If you're in an HOA property, maybe you need the license plate number of the car. These are things that you might not want to do as the guest just arrived, wants to shower, and just wants to enjoy their stay. These are things you can kind of get proactive about and do ahead of time. One of the things that we're able to do here in order to solve that is to do it through a guest web app. And that means kind of digitizing that whole experience. That doesn't replace necessarily the human touch. It just navigates guests through all of the stages that are important for you and your business. So pre-trip engagement becomes critical, because you can now do it via your phone. You can do it still communicating. As Conrad had mentioned, maybe that doctor did send an automated email. 99% chances it is an automated message, and he wasn't thinking, I can't wait to see Conrad, I'm going to send him my bio tomorrow. Although if I'm wrong, Conrad, let me know, because that sounds like the best doctor
I'll
out
know on
there.
Friday. Yeah.
Exactly. So being able to automate that, but it's a remarkable enough piece of the experience that we're here talking about it today. So being able to do that pre-trip engagement through one form or another is important. And then sharing what makes your local place unique. So one of the things we've developed recently is the AI guidebooks. When you're managing 2, 3, 5, 10 properties, you can build your own guidebooks because you know the areas really well. When you're managing 4, 5, 600 properties, things start to get a bit more complicated. You might not know everything about the cities. You don't have time to craft everything because it doesn't feel like an immediate problem. Yes, people are asking you about restaurants, but you have VAs to handle it, so it's fine. But the fact that they're still asking is a problem. There's a way to get proactive about the best places around and so on, and really shine that guest experience. Um, Transportation options. So, I wanted to talk about upsells a bit. This is where throughout these different stages, there's uh, points of contacts that you can use towards making more money. If I'm traveling business, I'm landing early morning, and I'll give you an example here specifically with Reykjavik. If you're a US traveler and you're going to Europe and you have a layover in Iceland, your layover is going to be in the morning. If you're staying 1 or 2 days in Iceland and that's an 8, 9 a.m. landing and your check-in's at 4 p.m., one, maybe you want quick transportation. Two, maybe you want luggage storage. And three, maybe you want an early check-in. So these are all the kinds of things that if I knew that all of these travelers that are coming in that are US travelers, I know they're landing in the morning and I can offer them awesome services to make that whole trip as smooth as possible. And you can do this ahead of time. So the pre-stay engagement is a great way to drive more upsells, but the during stay process is also a great way to drive more upsells. And for that, we've talked during stay as the pre-check-in piece. So operational upsells like early check-in, late checkout. These are things that you might want to know day of check-in. But quite frankly, you can also know ahead of time. You can collect payment intent ahead of time. But then other things like experiences, tours, activities, museum trips, all these things you can plan ahead, but you can also for the last minute bookers or people like myself who are, last minute when it comes to picking out which experience I'm going to do once I've booked my flight. You can share that you have all of these types of activities and experiences and generate more revenue. From uh, a cost, customer acquisition cost, keep in mind that what you're factoring in is obviously the revenue that you're generating, and the revenue you're generating from the reservation versus the revenue you're generating from experiences and upsells. There's a margin difference in the two. If you're a property manager, if you're an owner, it doesn't really matter. But if you're a property manager and you're taking 15, 20, 25% of cut on that nightly rent, your profit margins are fairly slim. If you're taking 0% cut and 100% of the revenue on experiences or upsells, the commissionable items, of course, then that's a great improvement to your margins. I mean, we're looking at 30, 40, 50% improvements to your margins. And if anyone wants to challenge me on that, I've got a whole spreadsheet that details it. So happy to share that. Um, and then, the other point is effective messaging. So being able to communicate effectively from booking all the way to checkout with your guests. And I'm sure, Conrad, communication is just as viable in the marketing piece, right? Effective messaging is, and you'd mentioned timing and messaging of some of these campaigns, right?
Yeah.
Do you see any parallels, by the way, between the effective messaging of the marketing versus the effective messaging of booking to checkout? And to go more specific, do you see any parallels with people who have poor effective messaging from booking to checkout? You usually have extremely poor messaging on the marketing side. Do you see any
Yeah.
parallels there?
100%. And one thing that I've always said about doing messaging and Stay, like I remember we did a webinar a little while ago, Francois, with Arthur from StayFi, and I talked about
Yeah.
the idea of like as soon as they hit that button to sign up for StayFi, let's send them an email. And like obviously that marketing email, we can't book them anything. Maybe with Enso Connect, we could sell them something actually, but at the time we didn't even think about that. But I'm like, you know what I like about that? They're now used to getting messages from you, like you were saying earlier, you nailed it. Not from Airbnb. Now I've got an inbound message from Francois, or the example I was given in the podcast is Conrad School Cabin Rentals. It's not a real company, but it's just a fictional one. But it's like now they're used to getting a message from me. That's going to work so much better when I send them a marketing message down the road. It's like, oh yeah, I remember this. Like it goes back to that whole idea we had before. So couldn't agree more. I think it's kind of like the way you do this should follow a logical line from booking to checkout and then after checkout, so that when the marketing and I want you to come back, you're going to be more receptive to it. Absolutely.
100%. And use the same channels that you were if you were emailing that customer, email them. If you were SMSing that customer, send them an SMS. There's so many different pieces to that. And so that's why I wanted to share as well the sort of new inbox that we've just released at Enso, which can help you do some of these things. So that's inbox 3.0. We've been releasing it progressively to our customers this week, and for new users as well. Just a faster, cleaner, and more collaborative approach to messaging. So being able to have zero messages in your inbox, the concept of zero inbox is something that we're now focusing on, so that you can focus on remarketing to your guests and not dealing with annoying questions, is what I'll call them. Drafting responses automatically for your customers. I get it. Like, you want Diana Torf here to know your brand. You probably don't remember her. And you probably don't remember Hannah and Carla and Lydia and, I don't know, Nolan and all of these different people, because you have so many guests coming in through the doors. But being able to get all of that information that's available in your PMS, available in your OTAs, available in your guest apps to summarize what's going on will make you more effective and more personalized. There's, I point out this little summary on the right hand side that we do. It's probably a feature that a lot of people love, because, if they're jumping into a conversation and they have to figure out what's going on, there's nothing more tone deaf than like responding to something without knowing the context of the conversation, but via the same messaging channel. Meaning the guest has no idea that it's a new rep that's on their, on the customer service side of things now answering the guest. They have no idea if it's Bob or Conrad or Francois answering. They just want the response. So being able to know what's going on is helpful. And then, as we pointed out, the sentiment. So tracking that sentiment, being proactive about it, knowing that if you have a guest that's unsatisfied pre-check-in, that is like you're probably going to lead to a one-star review. So that is probably more important than a five-star guest asking you a simple question that can be answered in a couple minutes with a slower response time. And then last but not least, views. So we get it. It's complicated. Like, there's so many different there's so much variability to all of this. Like, how do you see all of it? How do you know who's checking in, who's unhappy, who's checking out, who's really happy? who stayed 3 times and said really positive things, or who stayed 2 times and on the third time they were very happy and why. Being able to filter all of these things, having saved views is another piece of that. So, bit of a shameless plug here on Enso Connect for what we were talking about, setting up the right guest experience. But Conrad, really appreciate the
No, all
time
good.
here
I
to
was gonna
talk
say
about this.
kick it to your bonus slide. Let's get that one in there. I know we're pretty much up against the time wise, but I want to make
Yeah,
sure
you're
we can
good.
get there. Yeah, so real quick, we could do by bonus slide, but honestly, just email me, Conrad at buildupbookings.com. Let's give Francois the shine here.
For
This is a pretty
sure.
compelling offer, so bring us out on this one, Francois.
Yeah, so we did this a couple months ago, and it worked really well, which is to get a free messaging audit. Basically, using our AI model, Enso AI, we're scraping all the messages on your Airbnb and SMS and everything that you're communicating. It depends on which PMS you use. So again, back to that qualified, unqualified, there are certain people who will get a generic report, others who will get the actual detailed report with their data. It just gets you to better understand what challenges you're facing throughout that guest journey. Are you getting a lot of amenity questions? Are you getting a lot of parking questions? Are you getting a lot of complaints and checking-in questions, verification questions, you name it? What are the categories that you usually get the most? And that way you can just start, kind of ticking them out and fixing out those issues, whether it's, with a guest experience platform or just updating your workflows and your messages to be more communicative with guests. So that's your free AI messaging audit. And of course, if you have any questions about it, um, feel free to send me a message. But yeah,
Awesome. Well,
I'll
awesome,
go back
Principal.
to the
Thanks for hopping on. Really appreciate it. Yeah, we can end on this one. If you want a copy of the book, if you're based in the US, I'd love to send you a physical copy through the mail. You can check it out. If you're international, I haven't figured out the whole mail thing to get over the pond or even up to our great neighbors in the north. Haven't figured that out quite yet. So I'm happy to send you a PDF copy. So either way, I've got you covered. Scan that QR code. There'll be a little form you can fill out. I can send you over a copy of the book or just email me, Conrad at buildupbookings.com. Put something in the title so I know what it is. Book request, something like that. Happy to give you an assist there. And Francois, really appreciate it, man. I mean, this was fun.
100%.
To kind of put it together, I think there was some good content here. We'll try to be respectful of everybody's time and end right on time here. I know we kind of came right up against it, so all good stuff. If you have any questions, I'm sure we're both reachable through all the various communication channels there is out there. So thanks again.
For
We'll catch
sure.
everyone on the next webinar. Appreciate you, Francois.
For sure. Thank you so much.
Appreciate it. Bye bye.
Cheers.